This is a Glendale Library Arts and Culture program created for and featuring teens, edited and hosted by the Teen Library staff.
This episode is part of Glendale Library Arts and Cultures and the Southern California Library Cooperative's Be the Change series, which focuses on inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. Be the Change events will build collective understanding of systematic racism, elevate the voices and stories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and inspire our community to be the change.
As part of Native American Heritage Month in early November, Glendale Library Arts and Culture will host various programs. On November 30th at 6:30 p.m., author David Heska Wyden will discuss his new novel, Winter Counts. Register for the event at www.glac.info/be-the-change.
Hi everyone, it's Melissa.
And Desiree.
Welcome to the guest episode of Teen G.E.N Talks.
Today's guest is from Suquamish Nation, an Indigenous vocalist, aspiring MC, and music producer. Her debut album, Epicenter, was self-released in August 2018. While depicting intergenerational trauma in her hip-hop stylish fusion works, she equally draws from examples of her people's resiliency. Lawrence co-wrote and self-produced a single, which translation reads, "The Shoot Seed is Alive," representative of how the young artist is using music in pursuit of liberation.
Grab a snack and drink, and let's welcome Calina Lawrence to Teen G.E.N Talks.
Yay!
Thank you, Calina, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Yeah, so to start off this interview, I want to ask, when did you find your love for music?
Wow. Well, thank you both. Thank you all, your whole team. It's been really wonderful to connect with you via email until today. So it's good to see you both, even if it's only on the screen. And I'm very honored for the invitation. I'm told by my parents that I started singing when I was about 2. I couldn't even talk yet, but my dad swears that I used to stand on the couch and sing to whoever was in the living room. I don't remember this at all, but he's like, "You couldn't even talk yet, and you would just sing and sing and sing." So that's what he says. And I remember actually learning different songs when I was about 3 or 4. But I would say my actual love for singing probably started when I was about 7. And I'm very grateful because I was kind of surrounded by a lot of different musics, different Indigenous musics like peyote songs and Native American church and coastal songs and the canoe journey. And I also lived with this foster family. They were bluegrass musicians. So I learned a lot of bluegrass songs growing up. My brothers and my family listened to a lot of hip hop growing up and R&B. So I just was really surrounded by a lot of different kinds of music. And I really started to love singing when I was about 7. And I was kind of just listening to all of it.
How did you know you wanted to be a musical artist, like that exact moment?
Well, it was unplanned because when I was in high school, I honestly thought I would be going to school for my degree in psychology or social work. And I loved singing at the time, but it was just like for fun. And I think I was 20. I was 20 when I graduated with my when I graduated with my associate's degree, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to move on and major in. And I met some really awesome friends from San Francisco and Oakland, and they encouraged me to move to the Bay Area and kind of look at some of the music programs here. So I applied to the University of San Francisco for performing arts and social justice, concentrating in music. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to learn a little bit more about like vocal performance and activism in terms of incorporating, right, like social consciousness into my music and my lyrics. But I did not know I would have a career in music until I was like 21, I guess, 22. And I'm like, okay, this is really happening. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2016, and then I released my first single like a month later, January of 2017. And I was like, all right, this is what I'm doing now. So it's just me being open to possibilities, to working hard on improving and learning, and um, kind of transitioning from that just like loving singing for singing's sake and making music for music's sake versus actually like full-time job. So here we are 4 years later.
Was it hard for you to find your sound and your voice through your music, or did it come fairly easy?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you so much. I think for me, I understood that I was impacted and influenced by so many different sounds that I was like unintentionally kind of putting all of that influence into my music. And a lot of folks tell me too they can just hear like a fusion of different styles and different characteristics, and sometimes I make those decisions on purpose, and other times it's just what comes out of me. And so I kind of ride along with it. But I'm very, very blessed to be surrounded by a lot of creative and talented musicians and music producers who have really each taught me in their own way, like, how do I embrace the sound? How do I contribute, make it unique, make it my own, and also pay tribute and respect to everybody who is, guided me, whether they've known it or not. So yes and no, because you, as any type of artist, right? You want to be very intentional, and very respectful of the art form, and then also cater to like what's natural within you, and just let that flow as well. So I would say I'm still finding my sound for sure, and I'm still kind of like challenging myself, to try new things. And so far, it's been really fun. But I'm very, very influenced by a lot of different musics, as I mentioned, just growing up. So kind of all comes together.
What is your writing process like, and is it different every time?
Oh yeah. So there are some instances where I'll have an instrumental that maybe one of my friends has produced, or maybe I kind of came across online. And there are times where I'll just sit with it and I'll listen, and I'll just listen on repeat until maybe a melody comes to me, or, I'll just write with it and see what comes. There are other times where I'll have like a melody or a riff or a verse in my mind that has no music to it. I just kind of sit with it, and then I'll find some instrumentation that I can apply it to. There's times where I have words that don't rhyme. There's no melody, there's no structure. I'm just like, I know I want to say this, but I have to figure out how to say it so it like, fits rhythmically. So every single song has a different creation story, is what I would call it, right? It's like the way that it came to be. The process is very unique. And but I will say that like one common denominator that I typically have is like isolation, like being alone and just like immersing myself in the sounds, the instrumentation, the melody, or just whatever the message is through the lyrics. And then I kind of move from there. Sometimes I'll edit, or I'll ask other people for like their feedback or their input, kind of share it with them, and only a few trusted ears, and just listen to this, let me know what you think. And a lot of my like close friends and just people that I truly trust, like they're really gracious and honest, and they can always kind of express to me maybe where something could be a little more effective. But I also learned that in college. We used to have to put our lyrics up on a projection screen on the wall, and like everyone in class would give their feedback about our lyrics. And that kind of just opened us up to this process
Right.
of feedback. And I find that very helpful because I can be in my head about it a lot. But sometimes it just comes. Other times, I've written songs in 3 hours. I've written songs in 3 months. It's just the how the feeling comes together.
Music is always evolving, but how have you seen your musical journey evolve throughout the year?
You all have such good questions. um, I feel like for me, I can see a lot of my own growth in the personal healing that I've done, like just in my personal life, and how that affects not only what I write and how I write it, but how I deliver it as well. And I was just listening to a few of my songs from a few years back, and I could just hear like this urgency in the delivery. And I was still getting used to like recording in studios, and because recording in studios is way different than live performance, in my opinion. And so I really had to navigate kind of more control and self-awareness. I think I've grown in what I write about due to like the healing work that I've done, just from a whole lifetime of trauma and just all of my lived experiences. And also, what are the vibrations? What is the energy that I want to put out in the world? So I think that my music has evolved just by me staying open, growth, and to fear and to failure and curiosity, right? And finding ways to come to the art like with my full self in that moment.
You're also an inspiring EMC and music producer. What about these two things that drew you to them?
As with any space that I have access to, I have to acknowledge, shout out, and give my solidarity to the Black and Afro-Indigenous communities and young people that created the movement of hip hop, the culture, and just the work, the liberation work that they have been doing right alongside non-Black communities since the inception of the colonial United States. And for me, my journey to emceeing is also one that's similar to like my music career. I've been a poet since I was in 5th grade, and I've listened to rap and hip hop forever, and I never considered myself someone to rap or MC. As I started to really learn more about the long history of hip hop, I felt like I had more of an opportunity, I guess, to say more than singing with rapping. And it really came down to I can literally say more things in 16 bars than I can singing, right? When rapping. And at the time that I wrote my first rap was in 2017. So it's only been a couple years. That's why I say aspiring, because there are so many MCs who paid their dues to be able to be called that very important and responsible title. So I'm still earning my ropes, if you will. But at the time that I was like, well, I have a lot to say, and coming from like a poet background, I was scrolling on social media actually, and there was this hashtag challenge. It was the So Gone challenge. There's the song So Gone by Monica, and a bunch of MCs were like rapping over that instrumental, and I was kind of scrolling through them and at the time I felt like there was just so much that could be talked about, that if other artists weren't going to talk about it, then like let me give it a shot. And that was like kind of in the thick of the movement for Standing Rock and the movement for Black Lives that was just kind of really heavy on our timelines. And I thought, okay, how can I write a verse about Standing Rock with this So Gone challenge and see if this hashtag can bring awareness to what's happening on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. And that was the first rap that I ever wrote because it was just kind of the timing of it. And it was very well received. And I think that for me, it was like, okay, if I really commit myself to learning more, then I think I could rap. I think I could try to MC a little bit. Ever since, like, really tried to grow in that area. And production, same thing. Like, so many of my music friends and colleagues who have like engineered me or like helped me through the recording process also put me on game to like the actual production side of it. And I grew to be very appreciative of the amount of decision making that goes into it. And also kind of thought, oh, I wonder if I could give that a shot. So it kind of just comes down to like me challenging my own artistry, my own learning abilities, and how to help make me a more well-rounded artist altogether.
You've touched upon it a little bit, but maybe if you could like expand a little bit more on how does your activism impact your music, and how you incorporate your Native American philosophy into your music as well.
Yeah, I just love your questions. I know I've already said that, but it's really important. It's important when we're building these relationships, like the questions we ask, how we ask them, what are our intentions, right? And you guys are doing a really beautiful job. So thank you for
Thank you.
that. This is a question that I feel like I have been asked a lot of times, and I will admit to you, I never considered myself an activist until I got to college. And I feel like when I was in that academic space, it was a word that was being used a lot, and I was kind of confused because for a lot of Indigenous peoples, we don't really have a choice whether or not to be activated when it comes to our survival, our livelihood, our well-being, and the well-being of our communities. And that, you know, Black and Brown and Indigenous communities have been doing quote unquote activist work since we were impacted by colonialism. A lot of activism, the way that it's phrased, is what most of us in Indigenous communities would consider resistance, right? We are resisting our oppression. And that terminology for activism is kind of, well, we've already been doing that. And that's not to, you know, disregard the important work that's happening now, but it's to acknowledge the great sacrifices that so many Indigenous ancestors have made, even for us to be at the point that we are now, recognizing we have so much more work to do to really attain our liberation. And I, you know, used to say like, and something that I've heard said by several different community members is that we're born activists. And that means that there have literally been laws that have called for the termination of Indigenous peoples and our identities and everything that we come from. These laws have been created and upheld by the United States government and this political system. And when you really think about all of the tactics that they have used and are still using, right, on our incarcerated loved ones, on our asylum seeking loved ones, and our immigrant loved ones, the forced sterilization of Black and Brown women, and the attack on our spirits, right? This has been happening since the inception of this country, and Indigenous peoples have been resisting this. So when you're born an Indigenous woman, and I'm Suquamish, so being born a Suquamish woman is an act of resistance. You know, all the little Indian babies that my mom had was during a time when they were trying so hard to prevent her from continuing on this Indigenous existence. For me, having to recognize that at a young age, and also attending, all kinds of ceremonies and rallies and protests starting as a teenager, right? It was just what we do. We show up, and it's just ingrained in our culture. And it's unfortunate, and it's also inspiring at the same time. And for me, just always seeing music and art present in every movement setting, in every community setting, that's just kind of what you know. We don't have the choice to wait for someone to give us our freedom and our justice and our dignity and our safety. We actually, as the original stewards of this continent, we have the rights and the responsibilities to continue that work that our ancestors have done. And I will say that I understood from a scholarly perspective how to carry out like more effective way of incorporating a socially conscious lyrics or engaging an audience that otherwise might not have access to my perspective, right? And how do I create empathy through art, right? To kind of express what I'm processing, but also to express the importance of our humanity and doing what we can to preserve our humanity. Coast Salish peoples and Indigenous peoples, we've always learned through oral tradition, and we've learned kinesthetically. And I think that music also does that. It's a way to say, okay, if the ninth grade US history books are not going to accurately depict what happened between settler colonizers and indigenous peoples here, then we're going to document those things. We're going to be our own media. We're going to use, right, this art and these tools to educate society when you see so many gatekeepers actively erasing us from media and from the people of our communities.
Your debut album, Epicenter, was released back in August 2018. Can you talk a little bit more about the album and the inspiration behind it?
Yes! And I'm so excited because that album is 2 years old now, which is wild to me. But it was such a beautiful journey, and just my debut album, it really just, again, just kind of came together very effortlessly in that things just aligned. I worked with some really incredible engineers in Oakland and San Francisco. I worked with a few really dope music producers. The production on the album has various producers, and I think that kind of helped me keep a well-rounded sound and not confined to one specific sound or one specific genre. It's still hard for me to believe that I even have an album. And again, just the outpouring of support that folks have shown, folks who have purchased the album, who have requested and hired me to sing in their communities. I toured in Australia in Indigenous Wurundjeri and Gadigal territories there in Sydney and Melbourne, and that was a year after my album came out, and to see that the music had gone that far, and that our Indigenous relatives there were kind enough to host me and invite me. I mean, it's just been very surreal.
What can non-Native people do this November as a way to honor Indigenous people for Native American Heritage Month?
One of the best ways to support us is to not only support us in November, right? But like to support us all year round and to remember us all year round and to build and to connect and to invite us as like a consistent presence and representation in the spaces that folks are creating or that they have access to. And I really am grateful to the movement for Black Lives because they have really revealed how deep racism is, systemic and otherwise, and how invisible, right, certain communities are, and that the movement for Black Lives has in a large way remembered Indigenous people in the work that they do, whereas, that hasn't always been the case. We're at this really crucial point where we just have to be included and remembered and invited, and we also have to be the agents of our narrative. We have to speak for ourselves, about ourselves, to folks who don't understand, and we also need the folks who are listening, right, to digest and heal and keep an open heart and an open mind. I think that if we can remember each other all the time, right, every month, and say, okay, well, here is where I have privilege, here's where I have power, here's where I have the ability to say, wait, there's a perspective that's not represented here. And so this answer also is one that could kind of take on a lot of different directions. And I think that with this dialogue right now that's happening about reparations and about, addressing and dismantling white supremacy at all levels, one of those includes like our own responsibility to educate ourselves and to identify our barriers. Why are they in place, and how can we move past them for the sake of just humanity and the lives that are at stake right now.
Before we end, we have some rapid fire questions to ask. What is your favorite color?
Purple.
What is something you have been proud to say that you have accomplished?
I have never drank alcohol before.
What is some advice that you wish you would have known when you were younger?
I would say that it's definitely important to trust yourself, and it's important to learn how to advocate for yourself.
I have 3 people, dead or alive.
I really want to have dinner with Locksmith. He's still alive. He's a really, really dope MC from Richmond, California. I would love to have dinner with Leonard Peltier, and there's a lot of reasons for that. He's currently incarcerated and has been asking for clemency for a long time. During the American Indian Movement days, he was framed for murder, and was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. And it kind of speaks to the ways that systemically this country targets movements, right? Effective movements for liberation. I have so many questions for my grandma, and she and I were very, very close for a long time, but there were a lot of things that I never asked her or that she never shared with me. And there's so many times where I'm like, I wish I could ask my grandma X, Y, or Z. So I really wish I could have dinner with her again.
If you could visit any place around the world, which place would it be?
There's this like really, really awesome friend of mine who is also a musician, and a while back he sent me this video of a youth center in Nicaragua, and he was like, if you ever need a place to visit and you're ever in Nica, like, you're welcome to come here. And the video was just like so just beautiful, and I was like, okay, I would love to go. I would love to accept the invitation and go. So I would say Nicaragua.
What are some Native artists that non-Native people should listen to?
One is Lynn Ferguson. She is the foster mom I was telling you guys about earlier, the bluegrass musician. She has like 18 albums or something. She's Comanche, but she has lived in the Suquamish community for a long, long time. So Lynn Ferguson, she has incredible music out. And who else is on this list? My homies Los Racas. They're also a big part of why I came to the Bay Area. They're Oakland and Panamanian artists, Afro-Indigenous artists, and they've also been making music for a long time. So Los Racas, they do bilingual Spanish and English hip hop and reggaeton and dancehall, and they're just doing it. So a lot of love to them. And there's this really beautiful group of singers also in the they are Salish as they're from the Lummi Nation. They're called Thunderbirds Raised Her. Chotima. I mean, okay, the list is gonna keep going, but those definitely are some to start with.
Awesome. So last question is, what is a book that you have read recently or currently reading that you would recommend?
Yeah, so this book is special, especially because it comes from where I come from, Coast Salish peoples, and this is a book that a lot of us learn from. This book is called Haboo, and it's just full of stories from the Coast Salish communities, like up and down. I would say up and down I-5, but um, they're just very special, and there's a lot of information. It's a lot of context, just about our particular cultures and our particular instructions.
Thank you so much, Calina. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they can connect with you?
Yeah, thank you so much. I love this. I think you guys asked so many questions I don't know if I've ever actually answered before, like in this setting. So I felt very comfortable and appreciated. But most of my engagement is on Instagram at Calina Lawrence. And I do have a Facebook page as well for folks who prefer Facebook. My artist page is also just at Calina Lawrence. All of my music videos and some of my other content are on YouTube. Also just search Calina Lawrence, and all of my music is on pretty much every streaming platform that folks like to listen. I also have physical copies of my album. Those can be ordered through my website, calinalawrence.com. And I have merch, hoodies, t-shirts, things with my logo. And I also do contemporary beadwork. So if I ever have beadwork for sale or anything like that, then I usually post that to Instagram. But I will say that I am starting my second album. So so this one is gonna be really special. I don't have like a actual release date yet, but it is in the works, and I think the last post I made just said like sometime in the next 6 months to a year.
Well, we're excited to
you.
hear it in the
Yes.
future, and thank you so much for taking your time to talk with us. This was amazing. So, Dan, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Desiree and Melissa and everybody at Teen G.E.N Talks. I'm very, very thankful. In my language, we say "Hawadoobs chillup," and one sign of gratitude and respect is to raise our hands in honor. So thank you, folks, for having me and creating this beautiful space together.
Did you enjoy this episode? If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Glendale Library Arts and Culture channel.
Tune in every Friday at 4:30 for Teen G.E.N Talks. And if you would like to contact us and be part of the Teen G.E.N Talks, please email us at teengentalks@glendaleca.gov. Thank you. See you next episode.
Bye.
Bye.